The children are watching Austin Powers if you'd like to join. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And we don't break traffic laws here. My name is Shahir Dowd.
This is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Midsommar.
Midsommar. Is it Midsommar?
I got that summertime sadness.
Have you ever been to a Midsommar festival?
No.
Will you go now?
No.
No, it's funny because I have Swedish friends in New York who are like celebrating Midsommar. And,
Oh, no.
And it looked delightful, which is why I wanted to see this movie.
That's why you wanted to see this movie? Because you thought...
Swedish people seem cool. Actually, fun story. I went to college. I got an exchange scholarship to come to the United States.
Right.
There was a very, very short moment where instead of coming to the United States, I was actually offered the same scholarship with a flight thrown in from KLF, I think is the airline, to go to Stockholm instead.
Oh.
So instead of coming to the United States, I could have ended up in Stockholm, Sweden, where I could have wound in the same fate as some of the characters of this film, which would have made it interesting because then the timeline of this particular podcast wouldn't exist. So
and you could have
there
mentioned,
you go.
when you mentioned that you did go to film school, you might have had a slight Swedish accent.
Oh, actually, I was offered to go there not on film school, but in business school because that's I did a double degree.
Really?
Yeah.
This is very interesting. I didn't get an offer. This is so funny. This is how banal. I don't know which one. Both. My life is. I got offered. I took a job right out of college at this place called Technical Resources Incorporated. It was basically like a place that
TRI.
that was like pieces of the top secret aircraft for the government. And I worked in purchasing, so I bought widgets for the engineers in the basement and blah 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 blah. I worked there for a year, and they offered me a full ride to go to business school to continue to work there.
Ooh.
And I was like, no, mom and dad, I'm going to be a film major.
It's funny. I've met so many people who because that's essentially it. Like it was like the backup plan in case the filmmaking thing didn't work out, and maybe I should have taken it.
I mean, look, we all have our hindsights.
But I've met people who took the backup plan and are now like looking to transition back.
I mean, here's the deal, and this is now we're getting a little bit into life advice from Shahir and Matt, but I do believe that the grass is always greener, no matter how amazing or terrible your path that you chose. The path not taken will always look attractive to you because the actualities of it.
That's actually not the advice I would have given.
Oh, well, that's the advice I'm giving. It was not even advice. It's just something to realize because I don't want people to... I personally don't like it when people are like, oh man, if only I had done this. It's like, well, possibly that would have been great, but there's so many variables that another path like that would take you on. You have no idea how it would turn out.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess my point there is that I actually did get a degree in accounting and commercial law, and I've never practiced it ever. I can't even file my own tax returns. But
you have a degree?
I have a degree in accounting and commercial law, and I can't file my own tax returns. And here's the thing. I am not one bit regretful for not following that path. Like I am 100% fine with not having done that.
Sorry, I'm not saying any path. I'm saying like if you took a path and then you were currently unhappy due to a job or something else going on in your life, and you're like, oh man, you have that sort of wistful, like, if only I had done this. That to me is a little bit of it's a tricky brain thought.
Well, here's something that if only we had done better research in a previous podcast episode. People have been emailing us in this week. Thank you very much, and a couple of reviews which we'll read as well. But thank you to everyone who emailed us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hitting us up on Twitter. We have a new Instagram page.
We do,
with a solid 20 followers, which we need your help to build up a little bit.
That is right. Only Movie Podcast.
Yeah, Only Movie Podcast on Instagram. We'd like to transition away from using our personal Instagrams, although we will still post stuff there. If you're still following us there, that's great.
Yeah, don't stop following Skeletor for Prez. Just also start following Only Movie Podcast.
Yeah, but what was our first email? This dates all the way back to our Ballad of Buster Scruggs episode,
which I love. And please leave it to IRL friend Morgan, whom we both know from our MTV days, who writes us in.
Hopefully, have on the podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great. Morgan, come on the show, you beautiful monster. Okay, he writes, I'm sure you've gotten this email before, but in Buster Scruggs, aces and eights is known as a dead man's hand. It's not just a bad hand, it's the worst hand. Wild Bill Hickok, before he died, had that hand. I think if there's no wild cards, to pair with aces is not a bad hand at all. Odds are no one has three of a kind or better, but I'm no poker whiz. What Morgan is referencing is we got into a little bit of a poker discussion due to Buster Scruggs. where we were debating back and forth if two pair with one of them being aces was a decent poker hand. Shahir said he'd play it. I said I wouldn't. I think what this email has reminded me of is that we should have an Only Movie Podcast invitational.
Oh, right.
A real high stakes, $10 buy-in, $5 buyback.
Yep.
Morgan, you're the first one entered.
Is it a 3-card draw? Texas
I mean,
Hold'em?
we could play Hold'em. I like Hold'em. There's other fun games too, but Hold'em seems to be the one that, like, for whatever reason, like 2002, everyone's like, "Whoa, when did poker get metal?"
I think it's because of the movie Rounders. The would probably have some effect on it. But thank you again, Morgan. We will not be playing poker soon because now we know exactly how all of us are going to play.
I mean, I'll play fine.
We got a couple of podcast reviews as well on iTunes. Thank you for these, both 5-star reviews. Very much appreciated. First one from Potato Heart in Canada. I found out this exists from a YouTube plug. Best decision to go and check it out. I wonder which YouTube plug that was. It's probably an extra credits.
It probably was an extra credits one. Thank you, Potato Heart. Side note, delicious name.
Delicious, yeah. Especially fried with a little bit of oil.
Listen,
maybe a little butter,
I had that for lunch. I had
rosemary.
I had half of that name for lunch yesterday.
Potato
I'll
Heart.
let you decide which half that was.
What, with like the left ventricle or the right ventricle?
You know, however you want to go.
All right. Also coming in from the Philippines, great podcast. Seriously, yeah, this is better than most review of movies. Case in point, Cinema Sins at the same time. This is the balance between reviewing and a critical eye. Nice.
I like it.
Yep. Cinema Sins, we seem to be nipping at the heels of Cinema Sins for some reason.
And here's the deal. First of all, thank you so much to both of our listeners who wrote in. If you'd like to leave us a review, 5 stars is always the one we hope for, but we'll take as many as you were happy to give us. I don't know. Here's the thing. I have not thought about Cinema Sins, like, until somehow it came up on here. Like, I can't tell you the last time I watched a Cinema Sins.
I haven't watched them in a while. The one I still love is Screen Junkies. I think
Screen Junkies is great.
Honest Trailers is really, really terrific.
Honest Trailers is good. Also, How It Should Have Ended is fun, but it's not really reviewish.
No. I think Cinema Sins kind of had their downfall because of a little bit of a tweet storm from Jordan Vogt Roberts, who directed Skull Island. He kind of had like a little bit of a thing about Cinema
I remember
Sins.
that.
And it's true. When I watch Cinema Sins, I go, most of these aren't sins. They're just saying things. And I think that's maybe the irony of the whole thing, but it feels... and maybe this comes back to that conversations of punching up versus punching down. But the idea that that they're seemingly taking punches for the sake of being mean. I don't know. I haven't watched Cinema Sins in a little bit.
I mean, the interesting thing is, I don't remember when they were founded, but they have, 8.5 mil, like we'd said before. So, I mean, people are still watching Cinema Sins.
Of course.
So, yeah.
Smash that subscribe or like button, if you will. As well, we did post a video on YouTube, on our YouTube channel last week, which has got nowhere near the numbers as the Cinema Sins.
Close. It was close.
Very close. But my son reviewed Toy Story 4 for us on the YouTubes. So go and check that out. It's very fun, very cute. And he has been drinking the Toy Story Kool-Aid for the last couple of weeks. So we'll see how long that lasts before we switch to the next thing. Well, maybe I'll try to do another one of those at some point.
I mean, just take him to Midsommar.
I was thinking Midsommar would be kind of a great next step from Toy Story 4.
I mean, that's the natural progression of a filmography.
Yeah, exactly. Toy Story. Midsommar at this stage was my most anticipated film of the year because of my love for Hereditary. If you go back, Ari Aster's previous film, his directorial debut, Hereditary. If you go back to listen to our review, both Hereditary and our top 10 of the year of 2018, you'll see that Hereditary was my #1 film of last year. I absolutely loved that debut. I have a feeling that I guess modern horror that is I don't know. I was about to say the word elevated horror, and I hate that phrase. But I guess in recent years, my favorite films have been horror movies. Both the Witch, which the follow up from Dave Eggers is coming out shortly, The Lighthouse,
nice,
and Hereditary. And I think I'm not sure exactly what it is, but both. Because to be honest with you, I'm not a fan. I'm not like a huge horror buff, regardless. But both of these films, which are horror films, are films that I've absolutely been taken by and swept away with, and kind of loved in almost every facet.
I don't know if and I don't like, and I know you're not coining it, and I know you kind of walked it back a little bit. I don't like the term elevated horror. I think there's dramatic horror.
Yeah.
I think that and there's also with less of a sort of perfect vernacular, there's more like schlocky horror or like slasher films or like.
Well, horror has its own subgenre.
Yeah. And it's funny. Before even seeing Midsommar, people were debating, and I was kind of like just lurking on the Twitter box about like, is Midsommar a horror movie? And hopefully I'll have an answer by the end of this podcast, because there's good arguments on both sides.
Huh? Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought so, but okay. So Ari Aster's follow-up film, Midsommar, and the story of how this film came about is really fascinating, because Ari Aster had, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, had kind of made a little bit of a splash with a script for Hereditary. A production company in Sweden approached him and said, hey, we want to do a story about, kind of almost a slasher film, or some kind of just fairly prototypical horror with American tourists who go to the Midsommar Festival and get killed off one by one. But they'd read his script for Hereditary and said, could you kind of apply the same treatment of Hereditary to the Midsommar Festival?
Yeah.
And he initially resisted it. He was like, I don't know what I could do with this, like it was a writing assignment for him. But after doing some research and looking at the festival and kind of thinking about a few of his favorite films, particularly the film The Wicker Man, in that sort of subgenre of folk horror, he decided he could take on this assignment. And the gateway that got him into it was he had just been going through a relationship breakup around the same period as writing this, and he decided to turn the film into a sort of subterfuged breakup film through this Midsommar horror festival, horror film that he kind of started, which I thought was just a fascinating gateway in. The other part that was fascinating about this is that the production timeline for this film was incredibly accelerated as he was making Hereditary. So while Hereditary was his directorial debut, the financing came through for Midsommar, as he was finishing that up, and he knew that he had to film in the summer. I believe they filmed in parts of Scotland. I'm not exactly sure. Someone can correct me on that. So he kind of talks about it as the success. He didn't really get to enjoy the success of Hereditary and then get his next film set up.
It was already going.
It was already going. So he pretty much, as Hereditary, it was kind of lucky that Hereditary did well, because then it created buzz for Midsommar, because he basically had to jump from one production straight into the other. And this film has a sort of interesting... there's always that funny thing about making films in the United States, I guess, which was slightly different from me making films in New Zealand, which is like the seasons are much more pronounced. So you have to, if you want to make a film that's set in the winter, you really have to start doing your pre-production for it in the summer or even earlier than that. So you kind of have to think a couple of seasons ahead. And Midsommar does open in the winter. And clearly they might have started filming it sort of while they were in the post-Hereditary phase to kind of capture that, or it was done in post.
And I also think, I think that they that was whether it was done post or real. I think that was a very conscious decision to separate sort of the American beginning of this film and sort of its style to sort of give you the juxtaposition right away when you get to quote Sweden. To and get to the festival itself. I mean, the color palettes, the way it's sort of like, the harshness of nature versus the beauty of nature is very the dichotomy is there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it also makes it also like easily timestamps the entire film, so you know that there's a change in seasons as this happens. So Matt, can you read us out the IMDb plot synopsis for Midsommar?
I would love to. A couple travels to Sweden to visit a rural hometown's fabled midsummer festival. What begins as an idyllic retreat quickly devolves into an increasingly violent and bizarre competition at the hands of a pagan cult. Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
Also, when I was looking, I this is just an aside. While I was looking for the IMDb description for Midsommar, I accidentally spelled it wrong. And did you know that there is a very similarly plotted film that came out in 2003 called Midsommar?
Huh.
And the plot for this, I've never seen this, but it looks like a 2003 slasher film. Christian's sister commits suicide. So already we have a same-named character in the thing, which I'm like, okay, cool. Why, after his four friends, friend graduates from secondary school, they head off to a Swedish cabin for Midsommar, and then strange things happens. Is it the spirit of his sister? So it kind of breaks down. But like when I first read it, because I started reading it.
Yeah.
I started reading it and I was like, wait, Christian, this isn't the movie we just, huh? Oh, there's an A, not an E.
But also maybe an indirect remake.
Yeah.
Matt, what was your anticipation going into Midsommar?
It was going to be warm. It was going to, no school. No. I had mixed expectations. I was super pumped after Hereditary, and I knew that this guy knew what he was doing. I watched the trailer, and the trailer didn't do a whole bunch for me.
Okay.
And the reason is, while I think the juxtaposition of beauteous, ideologic, or ideally sort of like serene settings, turning it into horror works very well in a feature-length film. I didn't get like the scares or the things that are supposed to be a little bit disturbing in the trailer. Only one or two of them sort of like even remotely landed for me. And I think it was because it was a short form thing with the imagery that I was seeing. So I was like, okay, I'm like, I know this will be good.
Okay.
But I did not have, I think, your expectations of it.
Yeah.
Which, to be honest, I was kind of psyched because of that. Like
because of my expectations?
No, sorry. Because my expectations were not high, yet I knew logically that this was a filmmaker who I would very much enjoy what he did. Like, it was a weird sort of like leveling out of what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Which I think, I thought, overall it would help my movie-going experience.
Okay. Well, as I said, I tempered my expectations by doing the thing that I do, which is not watch any of the trailers. I was like, Ari Aster, making a follow-up to Hereditary, you got my money.
Yeah. They don't need to sell you.
You don't need to sell me on anything else. I will be going to the movies to see this. And I have to say, I think we're going to have a long conversation about this particular film. But for the first half of this movie, until a particular event, I was very much in the mode of this is the best film of the year, without a doubt, 100%. Not I'm in. There is so much care of craftsmanship, along with care of emotional weight given to the characters at the beginning of the film. Like it didn't. I knew that the film involved going to the Midsommar Festival, as the title suggested, and I knew that things would go wrong. That's about it. And I was not prepared for the first 20 minutes of the film, which took you on an emotional roller coaster of pretty much the worst events you could possibly imagine someone having, but done with that kind of cinematic elegance and beauty that he had developed, that he had demonstrated both in Hereditary and immediately in this. And it was literally from the first frame where we were seeing the winter coat of Sweden, played to sort of a beautiful Swedish. What would you call it? Almost not a yodeling, but a hem or something like that, and a hard cut straight to like a phone ringing in suburban America. The sort of care and precision for that sequence was so I guess such a warm blanket for me. Like I kind of felt I knew going in that I was in the hands of a great filmmaker right away.
Yeah, hard same. I think it took all of the stuff, and I'm not going to spoil anything for Hereditary, just in case folks haven't seen that. But there's a part, and I would say it's really the second act of Hereditary, where it does dodge away from sort of what the type of horror you think it's going to be, and it becomes a much more, I guess, realistic or possibly realistic, insanely horrific occurrence that happens to a family. And here, they basically they basically take that feeling, that emotion, that skill, and that craft and just slam it right in the beginning. They went full blown up, where they make the beginning of this film highly, highly effective. This is why I like Ari. And the way that he directs. And yes, we are on a first name basis at this point. He manages to take things that would be a legitimate, like, life altering and destroying, to that point, tragedy for characters.
Yeah.
And the acts themselves, or the occurrence themselves, is horrific enough, but he paints it in the same style as a supernatural horror occurrence. And there's something that films tend to do. And it's interesting because while, thank God, so far in my life I have not experienced something like this, and I only know a few people that have had like this level of sort of tragedy, it has to, I would imagine that the feeling that something like this would just be so psyche shattering that you'd feel exactly what the characters are supposedly feeling in a classic horror movie. Like, it's mind breaking, and it's incredibly saddening. And the way that he presents it in the warm blanket of horror, of cinematic horror, really is a 1-2 punch that I hadn't seen before Hereditary. And so again, here the whole beginning of this film. Which, are we going to gradually go through spoilers?
Yeah,
or how do you want to do it?
Here's what I think. I think we should give a general impression of what we both thought of the movie, which I think will evolve through our conversation about spoilers, but we should avoid spoilers. And there are spoilers right up from the get-go. I think there are things that happen at the very beginning of this movie that you do not want to be spoiled on. So we're gonna tiptoe around the subject a little bit. I'll jump in first here, and just to say, I walked out of the film a little confused. As I said before, the first half of this movie, I was pretty much laying the cards down for our top 10 at the end of the year, saying it's going to be hard to top this at this point for the best film of the year. And then there's a kind of turn that happens in this movie, and a switch away from a particular focus of this film, which makes my impression of it change somewhat. Now, again, I'm tiptoeing around the topics very carefully, but I will say this. I think one thing that Ari Aster was really amazing at doing was giving a sense of the way in which horror, I think as the way you mentioned it, affects the psyche in a sort of a deep ingrained way, and to the point where there's not an everyday occurrence, but there's something that happens at the beginning of this film, which is a horror moment.
Yeah.
But it's not driven by anything supernatural. It's not driven by anything particularly out of the ordinary. It's driven by a sense of inevitability. And I think that's something that Ari Aster has kind of tapped into, both in Hereditary, if you without giving spoilers away for the ending of Hereditary, and in this film, is a sense that the horrors of the world have a inevitable quality to them, and they have this sense that they happen whether we have agency over our lives or not, and in a way, the horror that he is tapping into is our powerlessness against the forces of nature or the forces of the world, and I think that's what's really powerful about his voice. Is not just that he's technically commanding, because he really is, very well-versed cinephile, and a very pronounced mastery of the camera. But it's also that he has a singular voice about the way in which horror affects our emotional states. And that's what's unnerving about his films. That is what is haunting about both Midsommar and Hereditary, is the sense that there is an inevitable path that our lives will take that will fall in the way of horrific events, and we are almost powerless to stop it. And the sort of thing that he does that I think is really fascinating is he finds both a beauty and terror in that. And I think that's a really unique skill. Now, obviously, the filmmaker I'm going to be thinking about a lot is someone that we've talked about, that's someone that's problematic, but is Roman Polanski. Obviously, Rosemary's Baby is the film I'm thinking about in particular here, which is that it had
Really, you like Rosemary's Baby?
Yeah, I really like Rosemary's Baby.
Go back and listen to every podcast we've ever done to confirm this.
I think we've only ever talked about it on Separating Art from the Artist, right?
No, we did it a bunch. I've even brought up this in Art from Art, which is fine. Rosemary's Baby, great film. I love it that's the, because you're right. You're 100% right in this scenario.
Yeah. I think Rosemary's Baby, for whatever, for all the problematic things that have to do with Roman Polanski, is a remarkable staging of the inevitability of terror and the lack of, in that particular film, ironically, is about the lack of woman's agency in childbirth.
Yeah.
And in Hereditary, the lack of agency has to do with the inability for us to stop the things that will emotionally hurt us. And in Hereditary, it's the death of Toni Collette's mother, and in this, it is another particular event which I won't spoil. Again, there is a second half to this film which changed my impression of this movie, but we just saw this last night, and I feel I will clarify what those positions are and what my questions are around that, but I feel like those will be clarified around a second viewing of this film. And I'm particularly interested in doing a second viewing of this film to sort of basically either test my hypothesis or test where I sit on the ending of this film. And for all of those reasons, I there's no question I highly recommend this film as an experience to go see in a theater. The second part of the third part of maybe of all of this is I am amazed that this film exists, and is put out by A24 and is being put out for an audience to see. I think it's only done like $6 million worth of business at this point, but please go see this in a theater. This is one of the singularly strangest experiences you will have in a movie theater, and one of the singularly strangest movies you will see with an audience. The kind of film that's usually reserved for kind of cult late night favorites and the sort of oddity of events that happen in this film aren't something that you will see on a regular basis at the multiplex. So I highly encourage you to go see that. And I was kind of blown away by it was the same thing I mentioned in Hereditary, the sort of support for doing things that are very off the beaten path in this film.
Right.
And so I love it for all of those reasons.
I think I agree with, I guess, the first 2/3 of your statements there, being that I think overall I really enjoyed my time in the theater. I think that first third is a masterclass in literally everything that is filmmaking. There is then a turn, which we will get to, which I won't go into, but same thing you said, that kind of makes you start questioning stuff. But at the end of the day, when I left the theater, we all, for the first time, actually, folks, here's a look behind the curtain. Normally, if Shahir and I go out and see a movie together and we're with a group of people, we sometimes go out to a bar or get some food afterward to talk, as, friends do. And Shahir and I often don't engage in the conversation because we try to save our conversation for the podcast. This time, because we aren't beholden to our own rules, we're like, you know what, let's try discussing it before the podcast and with our friends, and we did it, and I found myself in this particular case not having a ton to say, which I know for me is weird. This film, even after sleeping on it, etc., has not particularly, other than that first third, stayed with me much.
Really? It's been less than 24 hours.
I know, but it's like I haven't. Maybe this is my state of mind right now. I don't want this to be a detriment to the film, but there's and again, I go back all the time to this fucking well. But Mother, I thought about for like a week straight. Like every moment where I wasn't working or doing something else, I was like, oh, but what about this? And I'd like deep dive in the internet and like try to figure stuff out, and like it captured me in a way that this film just didn't. Now that's not to say that while I was in the theater, I was engrossed. Like, I was like, I will watch this. But it did have a shift. For me, it did become predictable, but it didn't really matter that it was predictable, because at the end of the day, a lot of horror that I like is predictable. It's just that I think I've sort of, once we get into spoilers, nailed down why that happened for me. Again, I would agree, yes, you should see this in the theater, because it's definitely different, and it's definitely something, a type of I don't know. I don't think I'd lean as hard as the like you've never seen a thing like this before. I've seen things like this before, and I know not maybe in a Midsommar sort of going up against Spider-Man last week sort of way. Like, yeah, I agree with that. But like, one thing I did say last night was that past the halfway point, I was like, oh, I know. I mean, again, this isn't. I guess this is a slight, but also not a slight to the film. I knew exactly what was going to happen.
Could you name me a film that, just so people know what you're talking about, where you've seen something like this before?
I mean, like, for instance, I'm just going back, and I know this is a different horror thing, but the latest Halloween, like, you kind of know exactly what's going to happen up until sort of the very end.
You think the latest Halloween is like this movie?
No, I just said it's not like this movie. You're asking for a movie I had a similar experience with.
I'm asking for. You said you've seen things like this before.
I mean, Mother comes to mind as a much more like.
And Mother is an odd film to play in a movie theater.
Exactly.
Well, right?
I'm just saying it's not the way you worded it. It just struck me as a chord. Like I know you. Maybe I just misinterpreted it, but it sounded like you were saying like you've never seen a thing like this in the theater, and I think it's rare to. I just don't think it's as. It's not like. If you watch horror films, you've seen stuff like this before. Okay. It's just not. I don't think done with this particular amount of craft, especially in the first third.
So let me put it this way, just to clarify what I was saying. The other films playing at the movie theater that we saw over the weekend were Avengers Endgame, John Wick 3, The Secret Life of Pets, Annabelle Come Home, Toy Story 4, Spider-Man Far From Home, and Midsommar. Midsommar, if you stumbled into Midsommar, you would feel like you stumbled onto an alien planet, I think, compared to everything else.
It depends on what you are interested in film. I'm saying, like, if you want to look at a bubble of a movie theater, right, with no outside context of the type of person that watches the type of films that they do, absolutely. Like, I 100% agree with that. I just think from it depends if you are a cinephile for horror or not.
Okay.
Again, I do think this offers things that you will not see often. I just don't think it's like a once in a lifetime, thing.
I guess.
It also doesn't matter. Like,
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you. Continue.
No, that was just pretty much it. I do think you should go see this movie. And we'll get into sort of the issues that we have with it as we move forward. This movie, for me, and it's interesting, I didn't know the story you told in the beginning about it kind of being a writing assignment.
Yeah.
And you could tell, well, maybe, I don't know if you could tell, the parts that resonated with me seems like the parts that were actually part of what was going on internally with him with his breakup at the time when he was creating this film.
Yeah.
The writing assignment of it, well, I think it was A- paper, let's say, was not nearly as interesting as the subtext, which the first third was sort of seeped in, and then was still there, but not really the focus. So like, this is what I'm saying. As a sophomore outing, I can see a little bit of a hurdle, especially because this was sort of a writing project.
Yeah.
I'm super pumped for the third time of what he does. Like, I will go see it instantly. Like, he's crafting a pedigree, even if this one stumbles for me in a couple places.
We should jump straight into spoilers at this point here, because there's no point about beating around the bush here. So from this point on, we will give you full spoilers for the entire film, which start right at the very beginning. The opening of the film is this sort of kind of an almost oddly paced phone call relay where Danny, the main character played by Florence Pugh, is essentially trying to figure out what has happened to her sister, or where her sister is, because her sister has left this cryptic message via email, something along the lines of "Everything is black now, and and mom and dad are coming with me too." But in the middle of that, there's this kind of the thing that's remarkable is that he's setting up the dynamics for her relationship with Christian.
Yep.
Which is that he is a seemingly ineffectual boyfriend, I guess is the way you would characterize it. Like he's there for her. He's not like the worst guy in the world, but whether he's really willing to like drop everything and come to her needs, and her needs are pretty significant at this moment.
I'll even go out on a limb and say a lot of men in their early 20s.
Yeah.
Depending on who you are.
Well, the thing was, I guess the thing that's really interesting, and now that we can kind of freely talk about spoilers here, is like, was he that bad guy?
So, he is not a bad guy. He is a selfish guy. So basically, I want to break this down as quickly as possible so we can sort of get into the reasoning behind that statement. So there's Danny's trying to reach out to her family that they're not picking up. You actually see the answering machine go off and the parents sleeping, and you're like, oh, they're just sleeping, and we don't know where the sister is. And it turns out, after she calls another friend because she's worried that she's bugging Christian too much. She doesn't want to come off as needy, but her sister is always putting her in these sort of panicked states. And then you see Christian's friends being like, oh, she's so needy, dude. Like, we're going to go to Sweden. Like, you got to break up with her, blah. And then he gets a call from her, just a guttural, terror scream when she finds out what happens. And then we're shown the horrors of what... basically her sister has done, and her sister left 2 cars running in the garage, ran tubes up to the parents' room off of the exhaust, and duct taped it under the door for is that carbon monoxide technically, or what? Yeah. Exhaust, poisoning and killing them in their sleep. And then the most horrific thing is another tube going to the sister's room with a funnel duct taped to her mouth and nose, and basically breathing it in, and she's leaning dead against the shelf that has the laptop above it that has all of the messages from Danny.
I think the horrific and beautiful thing about that sequence is the sense of the umbilical cord. Like, it looks like the umbilical cord.
I didn't even pull that. I like that.
Yeah, and that's what was sort of like beautiful and haunting to me about that whole thing, is this connectedness between the parents and the child. Because the horror is there that the child is killing the parents. And it is this like this kind of drowning of death. And I just found that image so hauntingly beautiful and terrifying at the same time.
I found all those things. I still don't know if I mean, I like the reading of it. I don't know if I didn't get that reading.
Right.
But the interesting thing is, this is where we're going to get into the plot of whether or not Christian is a bad dude or not.
I think that'll come down to our entire reading of the film. Really.
I will say, overall, while it is not untypical for young men to act like this, and I'm sure I've done a minuscule amount of this sort of thing in my early 20s as well, being ineffectual, I think he's not a good dude. I think he's a selfish dude. And the reason, and we'll sort of get into the reasoning sort of why, but basically what happens is he's on the fence about breaking up with Danny for whatever reasons he is. And everyone in a relationship can break up with people for whatever reasons they want to, because a relationship is a partnership and you need both people to be on board. Where he becomes selfish and a little bit of a child about it is up till this horrific point. He's probably wanted to break up with her, but he's too scared to do it.
Right.
And so he's protecting himself by stringing her along in a very, he's not there for her, but he's not leaving. He's like effectually like a phantom of a boyfriend. So she definitely can't go on through the catharsis or pain of a breakup without him. But then this horrific thing happens, and then he absolutely should not break up with her at that moment because she needs people, and he's not a monster.
Yeah.
So, I think probably because it goes from winter to summer, 6 months pass and they're still together.
Yeah.
And it seems like he is stepping up a bit, being a little more forward with his sort of care for her to a point. But at the same time, the trip to this Midsommar festival is coming up, and he didn't tell her that they were going. This is, that he was going, and he kind of tiptoes around it. Whenever Christian gets backed into a corner, he tiptoes around stuff and tries to make it like, and I've dealt with people like this before, like people that try to make the fact that you are uncomfortable totally not about them. Like, it's like, oh, well, like, I thought about it, like, maybe. Like, we hadn't decided. When, of course, they had decided. And then they go back and they're talking about it in the apartment alone. And then he acts like it's like she's crazy for being upset about it. Like, it's a flip of blame.
It's a somewhat light gaslighting.
It's pretty at that point. It's pretty intense gaslighting.
Yeah.
And then he even does it, and this is why I think he's that I like that he is this character. And he is a actually flawed, not good person. He gaslights his friends.
Yeah.
He invites Danny to go with them on this trip, and then tells them 2 minutes before Danny shows up at their apartment, and also says, oh, by the way, you were on board this 100% and you're really excited about it. Okay, thanks, bye. And then they all just have to go along to sort of like save their ineffectual gaslighty friend. And so, yeah, I mean, that's where I sit with him, at least up to this point. And I will say nothing that happens in the film later does redeem him for me.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting thing about this film, which is that, the thing I was talking about at the beginning, which is the inevitability of horror, is something that kind of starts playing out a little bit stronger towards the back half of the movie, after the Ostand ritual where the old people throw themselves off a cliff to save the young people for having to look after them. There's a thing that happens for me in this film, which is that it becomes less about the characters and more about the ritual involved, and the sense of inevitability starts sleeping in to the point where I'm not necessarily tracking how this ritual relates to these characters, or like how are these characters going to relate to, or react to what's happening in front of them, and I think Christian eventually starts playing into that, particularly in his final decision. Or we're not even sure what the decision is, but the moment at which he drinks the mushroom tea
for like the ninth time,
knowing it's going to be a bad trip, knowing that this pagan, like this group around him are somewhat dangerous to him, and knowing that there is this sort of additional factor of a young girl at the as part of the community who wants to have sex with him and is seemingly being approved to have sex with him. Which
not even seemingly, overtly approved by the elder of the community to have sex with him.
And he basically, I guess maybe this is the point at which he has decided. This is the thing, which is I'm uncertain about. And what the thing about this is I actually kind of like that there is some lack of clarity here about what kind of person he is, because I think if the film had gone out of its way to vilify him and make him do like really shitty things that weren't understandable, then I think the film would be weaker for it.
They do that with Mark.
Yeah, exactly. They do. Yeah, Mark is the Will Poulter character.
Yep.
Is essentially the guy who's like, oh, this is a shitty dude. Like I get it. Whereas with Christian, you're like, I actually understand where he's coming from and what he's trying to do.
I don't.
Really?
So here's why, and this is why, again, this is not a slight to the film. This is a compliment to the film and the filmmaker and the actor.
Right.
He is consistently the same gaslighty dude from start to finish. He always, this is how I read it. He always wanted to have, he never really still wanted to be in the relationship, but he's trying to save himself the difficulty of it. He always wanted to have sex with that girl, but he never would do it because he doesn't want to be seen as a bad dude by everybody, unless there's an excuse. And this entire place is designed to give him excuses. So he can't say they all lived. Say no one died and this was murder and the whole thing was just to get him to have sex with this girl to further the gene pool or whatever.
Yeah.
And they all went home. This character would 100% be like, I would have never done that. They drugged me, and this wasn't my fault. Like he would have, and it's consistent throughout the entire movie with everything this character does. He knows like he gives the most baseline boilerplate thing of like, oh, I shouldn't do this every time something happens, but just verbally and just enough for one other person to be like, come on. And then he's like, okay. Like he is looking for plausible deniability for every shitty thing he does, so that then even down to the thesis thing. Yeah. Like this character
is clearly to me is the most sort of defining. I know I'm doing a shitty thing.
Yeah.
But my point here is that I understand the difficulty that he is having with extricating himself from this relationship with Danny.
Sure, but that doesn't make it. Now, I'm not going to say he is a villain. No. I don't think he is a villainous character. I think he's like the writing of him and the way he's portrayed is it's a type of human being I have encountered.
Yeah.
It's a very human thing. It's flawed and not flawed from the performance perspective. The character himself is flawed.
Yeah.
And I've known people like this that literally do that. Like that are looking for they're too afraid to do the hard emotional work of moving forward or past a thing. So instead, they will look for excuses to be like, well, I tried to do this, but life was just too difficult.
And I guess my point there is that is a completely understandable reaction. Like that's the thing. I not only do I understand, I empathize with them.
Oh, I do not.
Really? You don't empathize with them?
No, because this is how I see it, and I
to the point that the final thing that happens to him, I'm kind of on the fence about. Like, I don't think he deserved it.
Well, no
Even
one deserved to be murdered there. No one was even Mark, who was a huge douchebag, didn't deserve to be murdered.
No one deserves to be murdered. But the film is, like we talked about this sort of in the Halloween episode, the morality clause of who gets to die and who doesn't get to die, and ultimately most horror films set up this parameter, which is that your actions will, in horror films, lead to your death in some way.
And this does that for most characters.
And for him, the film does that as well, which is that it sets up the parameters for which his shittiness eventually leads to his death. And my point here is that I think, and again, I think it's actually a compliment to the film. It's not a problem with the film.
Yeah.
Is that the writing is so subtle with him in terms of what he's doing that I understood what he was trying to do, even though it was shitty. And I empathized with it, even though it was shitty. And I
understood it. I did not empathize with it.
Right. Okay. So I empathized with it because I understood the thought process that he was having when he was making these terrible decisions.
Well, you can understand. I guess the empathy thing is the interesting thing for me in that sentence, because understanding what he's doing and the logistics of the psychology behind what he's doing is 100% one thing, but to empathize with that is to sort of be like. Empathy is the ability to sort of put yourself in the emotional shoes of the person.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see myself in a situation where you don't want to extricate yourself from a relationship, like extending it out for the longest possible time, even though you completely want to extricate yourself from the relationship. And I understand that emotion. I understand that impulse, that sort of unwillingness to confront problems, and I empathize with that.
I can empathize with that aspect of it. What I can't empathize with is his continual gaslighting of every element of his entire life. He is 100% a coward. And he does not want. He's always looking for the out to let him do whatever he wants to do at the current moment. Steal his friend's thesis, sleep with the young girl even though he's in a relationship, and not break up with his current person.
Have you ever known that you needed to have a confrontation with someone and chosen not to
for maybe a week? Yeah, because you have to figure it out. But and again, I don't want to say that I'm. I love that we're blaming characters.
Yeah,
but the getting out of the relationship portion of his indecision, I can empathize with. I get that.
Yeah.
It's how we see him with his friends, with the thesis, with the girl. It's all the same selfish. As long as I say this one thing later on when this conversation happens, I'm morally covered. That's what he's doing, and that is something that I will not and cannot empathize with, because that makes you a gaslighty sort of wrong person. Again, should he die?
No.
No.
And my point here is that I think the writing is so, my point here is I didn't want to, I like that the film doesn't vilify him to the point where he's he's completely oblivious to the traditions that are going around him.
Yeah.
He just has his own desires kind of thing. I understand what his desires are, and I understand the things that he's trying to avoid, and I understand the weakness that he displays, and I empathize with it. I completely understand what it is he's going through, and I think that's actually a testament to how good the writing is on that, on his character. He's not clear cut. He's not an out and out villain, and there are sort of interesting ellipses that this film does that I thought were really fascinating, that allowed us to kind of just have that little bit of doubt about what was happening. Particularly, so the one ellipse for me that I found really sort of interesting and kind of gave me the benefit of the doubt for him was after he'd been told, you have been approved to have sex with this girl. We sort of cut away. We don't exactly know what's happening. And then he's got this indecision about whether he should drink the mushroom tea because he doesn't want to go on a bad trip. But he seems to have this his performance and the sort of the time that we take to sit on him has this sort of fatalistic view of the world.
He's never not drinking that tea. That's my point.
Well, he does give it back to her.
Yeah, I know. But he's doing the thing his character. I know he's doing the thing he does the entire film, which is give himself plausible deniability.
You think he always wanted to drink the tea, and then
I think, and maybe we're talking about the same thing from sort of two different sides of the coin, where you're saying there's an inevitability of the situation. I'm saying his character is the inevitability.
I get here's what I'm saying.
He wants to seem like the good guy and still do the shitty things. That's what his character is.
I guess what I'm saying is that the ending of this film is clouded by doubt of like what people's intentions are.
I don't ever doubt his intentions.
Right. And that's where I think the writing of the film is actually very strong, because I am left at the end of the film feeling somewhat mixed about how I felt about these characters and whether they deserved what they did, what happened to them or not.
And I think due to the writing, and again, a compliment to the writing, I'm saying this is a good thing. I never doubted Christian's desires or what he was trying to do. I think that's an incredibly, and you're right, it's super subtle, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I think that's also, we're basically complimenting the filmmaker for experiencing it two different ways.
Yeah, I think my thing here is that the doubt strengthens the ending for me. And particularly Danny's smile at the end is kind of an interesting moment to end the film on.
That's where I start doubting things, is sort of the Danny character, because we can get into that in a little bit, but because I'm still confused at how I don't have so while I have strong opinions about the Christian character that I've just sort of stated, Danny's journey, again, while I enjoyed watching it, I am less ardent to attach what I think to it, because I'm literally not sure.
Yeah. And
I don't think the not sure is a good thing, because it's an unsure where I also am not trying to figure it out.
I think there's what's great about the ending of this film is the openness to interpretation that you can kind of bring to it, and like how you feel about it. You can feel that Danny has essentially committed an atrocity at the end of this film. Essentially the final act of this movie is we realize that the entire ploy of this commune is to select 9 sacrifices from the outside and 2 from the inside, I believe.
I think they just had to cover, from what I gathered, and again, it's very vague. The ritual is they have to make 9 sacrifices. It's going to consist of however many elderly have hit 72 years old, however many people I keep calling it the outward people, the people that, like the Amish people go on Rumspringa, whatever, the people that go out into the real world and come back with friends, however many people they can bring back, and that if that number does not equal 9, then there are volunteers. Then there's volunteers up to the 8th one, and then the May Queen chooses between 2 people.
Right. Yeah. And I think that. That sort of the problem for me, as I stated at the beginning, is that the second and third act of the film start to feel where the filmmaker is really invested in the process and is really invested in the ritual, and I started losing track of character journeys in that second and third act, particularly Danny. The thing I was kind of most interested in was seeing how Danny reacts to the situation.
Yeah.
And there are certainly moments in this film which has the sort of the classic horror tropes of, you dummy, get out of the scenario, what are you doing? And I think anyone in I certainly felt this way in the audience, was like watching it going, you just saw 2 people throw themselves off a cliff, and kill themselves. This is not a place you should be.
Yeah.
You should get out right now. And 2 characters do try to do that immediately, and the film does kind of explain how that doesn't work. But Danny, Christian, I forget the other character's name, Josh.
Josh,
played by William Jackson Harbour, and Pele is part of the commune.
Yeah.
And Mark as well, all kind of stick around.
Side note, just a name thing, and I couldn't get this out of my head. Every time, especially at the beginning, there's a scene where they're on the phone, and Danny's talking to Christian, but Mark's in the back going, "Hi, Danny. Hi, Danny. Hi, Danny." And she goes, "Hi, Mark." And all I could think of is, "Hi, Danny."
Right,
"Oh,
right.
hi, Mark." And like the entire time, the room, it kind of was like, "Get out of here, you stupid reference."
So, okay, this is a sidetrack. We talked about this really briefly last night about not watching trailers.
Sure.
I don't watch the trailer, so all I knew about this movie, Aster, something to do with Midsommar Festival, shit's gonna go wrong.
Yep.
Right? Because I have no point of reference for the movie at all, like no sense of imagery, there's a couple of things. First off, I thought that the sister's suicide was going to be the reason that they were in the Midsommar Festival. They were being led there because that's where the sister was. And that's, what was happening, and this is maybe how I can best explain the not watching trailers thing does, is that I start making connections that the film is presenting to me, not what the trailers have presented to me. So when he's doing the hi Danny thing in the background, like, and Mark is kind of high, and he's talking about, we just smoked some resin. Immediately in my mind, I started going, oh, Christian is the guy who's going to drug everyone in this whole scenario. So
I thought that too. Like, I thought that about the sister. I thought that about Christian, but I watched the trailer. So I think this trailer, while the trailer did not get me excited, and I don't think it succeeded in that regard, the trailer was a good trailer in the sense that it did not ruin anything about the film other than the things that you had already predicted. Like it's a Midsommar festival. Shit's gonna go wrong.
Yeah, but that's just basically the genre and the
sure.
The premise,
but
right?
also a lot of times we know the trailers tend to break things.
And my other thing there is I love the moment that she, for example, again we're getting into the trailer conversation, but like when she walks from the bedroom into the airport.
The bathroom to bathroom?
Yeah. Like that's given away in the trailer, and I loved seeing that for the first time.
I didn't even remember that in the trailer.
It's in the trailer.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I love like just experiencing that for the first time and going and like being disorientated by that and seeing how wonderful that transition is. So that's what I love about that. But coming back to these two characters, so I think the problem for me in the second or third act is we lose track of Danny's reaction to these events and essentially her,
except for one big one.
Yeah, but her agency in choosing whether to like go along with this or not. And what happens there is, I think the profoundness of it is that we get the sense of inevitability about it. Again, the word I keep tapping on here, is that it feels like whether they want to or not, they're not getting away from this festival. They're not getting away from these people. They're not getting away from what's going to happen. What's going to happen is going to happen. And I think that is it's an odd experience, and there's only one moment at the final turn, which is basically Danny's choice, that suggests like how we're going to do that. And it's not the choice that you're kind of thinking that this kind of film is going to give you, in terms of like the morality clause of horror movies, so to speak.
I mean, it felt not, like in the vein.
They're not, like, again, I would have felt that, logically, once you see these two people kind of kill themselves off the cliff, the elderly people, the entire push for Danny and Christian and Mark and Josh is to like leave, right? But that's not what happens. In fact, they all end up staying, and we have this argument about theses or thesi, and about an anthropological study, and Danny kind of just gets relegated into like just going along with tasks as they're happening.
Yeah.
Now, I think the thing in a rewatch it would be interesting is tracking how much attention Danny is playing to Christian at that point.
Right.
Like, because in the middle of this is this sort of the pubic hair and menstrual blood, choosing.
What a beautiful tapestry
moment. And I think that it's all there, but for me watching it, there was a little bit of lack of understanding of where this was going.
I think after our conversation last night and this one, I think and this is not a full thought. I want to work through this with you. So shoot down the breaking points, and I'll see if it stands up. I think I know why the second half didn't work for me as well as the first third to the last two thirds. We do get I will never fault a horror movie for characters being stupid and sticking around in a dangerous situation. It's very hard to pull off characters still being trapped in a place and being smart. There's tons of dumb horror movies that I really do enjoy when people, the classic literally run upstairs from the killer, right? Like you can't get away upstairs.
Yeah.
You're trapping yourself.
But the best horror films are the ones that kind of explain why you run upstairs, right? Like explain why you stay in a situation. Jaws explains why we're still on the wall.
Right. If you can do that, that's all the better for it. The interesting thing here is, though, we go from the first third is this sort of inevitability of, like you keep using the word, of just like horrific situations and people trapped in situations and things just sort of barreling forward because that's the direction that things move. And then, and I would say that no character is acting dumb or stupid. Like, I mean, there's people with character flaws, of course, but then when we get to right after the old people throw themselves off the cliff, like you sort of said, it becomes like the tropiness of characters making stupid decisions to stay is in direct contrast for me with the entire with how the film is shot and feels. in a I'll call it a standard horror movie or a horror movie where I am more used to this trope being played, the entirety of the film feels the same level of silly as characters sticking around for dumb reasons.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That was the not the breaking point, but I was like,
Again, I was always interested in what was happening, even though I think I figured it out and even though this was happening. But I think that's why this film is not one that I am questioning like I questioned Mother, or that I question like whenever it's something like really deep-seated gets in me and I need to know like what the filmmaker was thinking. That was the moment where I was like, there are two disparate types of horror here butting up against each other, which, for instance, in Hereditary, never happened. Even though there was a balance of sort of supernatural and, I guess I just call it natural horror. So that is when I sort of started being like, oh, okay, so I'm just going to go on this ride. And I don't have to think about it as much, because even though this is a very beautifully done, stylized piece, the characters aren't thinking about it that much, and the characters aren't thinking about it in the same beautiful, stylized way that it seems the filmmakers are. Yeah. And then I just sort of disconnected from that part of the experience.
So I want to read a quote from Ari Aster, who gave an interview about this part of the film. And he essentially he was being asked the question about like the symbols in the film. You know, like there's a lot of work in symbols in the film.
Yeah.
Well, not just that, but like you know, like how do the images in the tapestries. You know, like when people are talking about the world has gone black kind of thing, you know, and they're going into an entirely lit way. And he was being asked the question about like, you know, do you plan a lot of Easter eggs in this film to kind of, you know, reward people? And he said, well, I definitely want to make films that encourage people to look closely and that reward an active engagement. I don't know if I would say there are Easter eggs in the film so much as I've kind of buried details that are close enough to the surface that they're there to be seen. If you see them and if you look around, they hopefully give the film deeper thematic resonance. There are a lot of prophetic images in the Midsommar house, which are where it's like, okay, if you really look around, you can see what's going to happen to this guy and what's going to happen to this guy. The whole story is kind of telegraphed on the walls of the film. And for me, that was fun even more so than with Hereditary, because this is a film where people walk in knowing what's going to happen. The folk horror genre, and I guess he's referring to films like The Wicker Man.
Yeah.
If you have any history with watching these films, you know where it's going. The fun for me of this film is that if there is any fun in watching it, is not the narrative surprises, because for me, everything is telegraphed.
Yeah.
It's about getting to the place that you know you're going. And I guess maybe I'm not as well versed in the folk horror genre, but I guess, you know, like Mandy was another film that we reviewed that kind of had that similar vibe,
similar end building too.
Yeah, and similar, you know, sense of inevitability to the
end,
and
a pyramid and a
yeah. I guess I'm not as well versed, but I actually found that kind of element to it a little bit of a narrative letdown, where I wanted to be taken by surprise by the characters, you know, like by the characters' reaction to doing things. And I think, you know, again, the word I keep using, inevitability, it feels like what is happening to all these characters. Even in some ways, it's a positive, because Christian's actions to drink the mushroom tea felt like he was kind of accepting of his fate, or
100% was
accepting of the actions that he was going to take.
Yeah.
And it felt like he was doing that because he maybe knew where this was all heading.
No, he knew that he wanted an out. I still stand by that.
Whatever that is. And then the interesting thing here is, let's go to the final smile that we all talked about here, which is, there was an interesting interview in USA Today between the lead actress Florence Pugh, and I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly.
And this is going to be a weird thing to say, but a absolutely stunning frown. She has like the expressions, because she's very sad for a lot of this thing, and like, you know, you always see people that have really nice smiles. Her face was so emotive in different levels of either sadness or intrinsic horror or angst or whatever. And she only, I think, to be honest, there might be a fake toothy smile somewhere else in there, but I think she only smiles at the end of the film.
Oh, I think she does smile at other points.
I think it's more like a nervous. It's like a nervous, like, yeah, sure, like
yeah. But the smile at the end of the film is really the punctuation mark that makes this film kind of interesting.
Highly expressive human. I just thought that was very, very well done.
Before we get to that smile, the moment at which she basically sees Christian, having sex with the other woman, and she, has this like absolute breakdown, and it's not completely related to what she's seeing, but it's also related to the fact that she's on mushrooms, but also related to like the trauma that she's experienced throughout the entire movie. It's all culminating. There's a moment where all the other women her age, follow her into one of the barns, and she cries and they cry in the exact same way. I thought the thing for me that was so startling was that was so beautiful.
It was
such a beautiful expression of like how you can like express grief. Essentially that's what she needs from Christian. She needs that response mechanism from Christian.
Yep.
And the fact that this community ends up giving it to her is so strikingly beautiful that it actually makes the end make sense for me.
Sure.
But I don't know how you felt about that moment, but I was like, this is stunning.
It's interesting. A, agree with that 100%. B, that moment and also the sex scene, which there are admittedly sort of funny parts.
And those two scenes are intercut.
Yeah. The audience was both, in the movie theater, was both aghast and laughing.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting experience. And at first I was like, oh, this is like not working because people are laughing. But then I was like, I don't know. Like, I think it's all part of it.
I think, again, the sort of the talent in filmmaking is, not 50 to 60% of the game is just getting a reaction from your audience.
Yeah.
And he's getting reaction. He's getting terror, laughs, nervous giggles. People don't know what to make.
Yeah.
But he's presenting images that evoke a response. And so the final image that evokes a response is Danny's smile.
Because she's watching the 9 sacrifices, 3 of which are alive, 1 of which is Christian, inside of a bear, like a bear husk, who's representing the beast or representing the darkness or whatever the evil thing in the...
The movie reference that I have in mind, which is a folk horror reference, I guess, as well. A movie which I saw very, very young was The Rainbow and the Serpent. The Serpent and the Rainbow, which is about this sort of occult cult which has this burial ritual where someone has to be buried alive. Mm-hmm. And the other one was The Vanishing, where a character, I guess this is a spoiler for The Vanishing, but this is an interesting one. There's 2 different endings to The Vanishing because it was remade as an American film, and the American film completely inverts it.
Okay.
But essentially a character gets buried alive, and it's a sense of like absolutely being trapped. I think one of the best episodes of The Twilight Zone had that as well, where like a character was essentially powerless to see what was happening to them while they were being performed
because
surgery.
Christian was alive and awake while he was being stuffed inside of a bear carcass, but also he could not move.
Yeah, and I loved that image. Like we at the very beginning, the Londoner says we're just not going to talk about the bear,
and they pan over. It's just a giant brown bear in a cage.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, and suddenly the bear comes back in the end, and it relates to a painting that's at the beginning of the film that's on Danny's wall, which is the bear and the princess. Like all the symbols kind of come together in this really beautiful way in this film, and that smile, it comes back to that question of the conversation we were having earlier, which is that does he deserve this, but what does this smile represent? Like, emotionally, she is throwing away Christian.
Yeah.
But does he deserve to be thrown away in this way?
He deserves to be thrown away. No one deserves to die again, I say. Like, for instance...
But I guess that comes down to whether you take the ending as literal or as metaphor. Like is the film metaphorically about her catharsism of this grief?
I
or
think
is it
it
literally
is.
about this death?
Christian has been rolled up because he's been so ineffective and so just meh, for lack of a better term, in their relationship. Well, he's been there for her. He hasn't like really been there for her. So he is then wrapped up in all of the grief of her family dying.
Yeah.
And in that moment when she finally decides, because he's not going to do it, he'll keep drinking the tea and sleeping with other people and not breaking up with her, then she is going to finally make the decision to cast off him, which in a sense, because it is so entangled now with the tragedy of her family and she just had the emotional catharsis that she needed from him, from all of these stranger women.
Yeah.
She has now come sort of full circle and now is finally putting that bag down. Like the baggage is being put down, and that's why she smiles. Now, granted, that is the metaphorical, her journey coming through at the end.
Yeah.
I think it's important to read this film from both a metaphorical and a actual what is happening thing.
Yeah.
Straight up, she is an accomplice to murder. I mean, and I think again that any character deserves to die in this film. No, like they're all assholes in their own way. Granted, that is again a horror trope where like you kind of get the folks on board in the audience to be okay when people get offed, depending on who they are. Mark, it's okay because he pisses on the ceremonial tree. Chidi, I can't remember from A Good Place. What was his character? Josh?
Josh is there. Yeah.
Josh gets offed because he goes and takes pictures of the book. I mean, they're probably going to off him anyway, but he gets offed, at least at this point, because he goes and takes pictures of a book he shouldn't. Which, side note, the person who kills him is wearing Mark's face for some reason.
I didn't actually catch that. I was like, ooh, that guy's got weird eyes.
Doesn't make any sense with the rest of the imagery that I caught. There were one or two moments where I was like, you're taking the victory lap of creepy, and it doesn't quite tie in because again, the bear and the fire, and the tapestry, and the pubic hair, and the menstrual blood, and like all that stuff, like is literally on the walls. Yeah. And there were certain disparate moments of the cult's creepiness that just show up.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. But I think it's important to read this film from both sides. I don't think it is a one side of the coin thing. You can be 100% okay with finally Danny having catharsis of kind of coming through this journey and kind of sort of finding her place in a people that can actually support her in a way that she needs. Family. She found a new family.
Yeah.
And that it is important to witness, but also you need to see the dichotomy of, to do this, 4 of her friends, one of which her boyfriend, and 5 other people had to die, and there were numerous horrors that had to be induced to actually get this through.
Yeah, no, and I think there's no denying the irony of the horror there, but the final sequence, particularly the music and the sort of, again, that process of watching the ritual is beautiful, right? Like it's horrifically beautiful, but it's beautiful. And I think the final sort of the final moments of the film feel like somewhat of a triumph for Danny. And I think that's where the sort of the cloudiness of the film is actually working in its favor. I like that it is playing on a tapestry that is not kind of cut and dry like we're expecting, which I think is what you're saying. I wanted to point out this interview that came from USA Today, and it was basically Florence and Ari Aster basically giving
the Machine. Sorry.
Yeah, Florence and the Machine talking about their different interpretations of that final moment. And according to Per. Again, it seems like a weird way to say it. Is that how you say it?
I think so.
Yeah. Danny's act of seemingly callous vengeance isn't so cut and dried. In fact, the actress suggests that her character is so far gone mentally by the end that she doesn't even realize that she's killing Christian, which is how she chose to play the scene. And here's quoting Florence, "I thought it would be interesting to have the love of her life in the building, and she's a kid looking at a firework," Per says. "That's how I imagined it, saying this is someone who is completely gone now. She doesn't realize what's going on, and she's just really happy that the fire is going up." So when we shot that, that's what I was trying to get at. That's what made the ending possible for me. I don't think I would have supported Danny as much if I knew that she was if she knew that he was in there. I don't think anybody is that sinister. But Aster comes in and actually disagrees with her.
She played it that way to get a certain reaction that he wanted, and then that's directing.
and she kind of goes on to talk about how the fact that there are other scenes cut from the film which illustrate that she might not know that Christian is in the tent, or in the hut. But Aster said, while Aster confirms that those scenes existed, he respectfully challenges Per's interpretation of the ending. "I wouldn't agree that there has ever been an iteration of the film where she didn't know he was burning," Aster says. "But there are lots of scenes that were cut, and probably a few that helped illustrate that she was losing a grip on sanity, which you hopefully will still see." He points to the climactic scene after Danny catches Christian cheating, and she begins sobbing uncontrollably. The group of women from the cult carry her indoors and huddle her around her, echoing her screams and her wails. That's her breaking point, Aster says. It's also fusing her with this community.
Yeah, it's also a healing point, which is weird.
Yeah, she found people who are willing to feel what she's feeling, and she's just able to purge. So I think for Aster, that moment is actually Danny's journey of purging Christian from her life. Mm-hmm. And I think, and it's weird because that ending is the sort of, again, with the music and with the sort of the sequences of shot, the lack of like any characters stopping what's happening is a sense of triumph. You know, it's a kind of like perverse triumph of character. And it's similar to what he did in Hereditary as well. Like, you know, Hail Paimon at the end is a perverse triumph of this cult kind of coming together to like to create this new character. And I think it's weird that is.
Do you think they're going to come together in the Ari
Paimon
cinematic universe?
Maybe, yeah. But that's also why I also, you know, pointed to that thing at the very beginning of the film, which is that it's very unusual to see a film that takes a triumph in evil winning in this way and with this much perversity. And I think that's kind
in
of
Hereditary or in this?
In this. And I think that's kind of wonderful to see. I just love the sort of like feeling the audience's uncomfortableness with this, you know, like
moral evil won.
Yeah.
Personal evil lost. And by that I mean Danny is now the best Danny we've seen at the end of the film. From the entirety of the film, she is the most okay.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting, weird, terrifying concept.
Yeah.
From an outsider, moral, even the audience sort of looking at it, like it's fucked up and evil won and oh shit, well that's depressing. But at the same time, this one character in this entire film, this worked out weirdly the best it possibly could given her situation from the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
Like, because here's the deal. Again, going back to Christian was never going to become not a doofy shithead. Like, he's not going to have like, and the writers, but the way the film went, he never was. Like, I think they did a good job showing that this is who this person is, and they're not changing. So there had, like, if he's not going to make a decision, both either in person or metaphorically, she will do both. Due to, you know, I mean, she could have been, she is coerced.
Well, I also like that she is the one that has to make the decision. Yep. You know, like we've been waiting the entire film for Christian to like,
and she doesn't. She pulls the trigger.
She pulls the trigger.
So the moral of this story is cults always win, and get out of your deadbeat relationships.
Yeah, I guess so.
Do you have any other final thoughts?
No, I think the film is weird, wonderful, beautiful, strange, so unusual to see at a movie theater with, you know, Spider-Man playing in the next theater and Toy Story and playing the other side. And for all those reasons, even though kind of the second and third act kind of didn't quite play for me while I was watching it, I think there's so much meat on them bones kind of thing that I will revisit this film and, you know, my opinion of it will change. That first half again, that first, you know, third, still the best.
Real good.
Yeah, best filmmaking I've seen this year. A lot of similarities in this film to another film that was kind of my best film of the year thus far, which was Jordan Peele's Us. And I feel like the moral ambiguity of both these films and the moral ambiguity of kind of this type of horror, I think is really fascinating and kind of points to the power of great horror. You know, the power of great horror to kind of make social commentary. Really, really wonderful. I highly recommend it.
And I'll just say I agree with most all of that. I do think it loses its sort of tone between like what a horror movie's silly stuff is, plus what the level of horrific drama that it does near the second half. But again, it's worth seeing. I've enjoyed this conversation not weirdly. I've enjoyed this conversation here more than I actually thought I would. While this was not a film that had me internally debating things about it, it has been a rich place to discuss with other people. So thank you for that. And this, I guess, has been the only podcast about the film Midsommar.
And if you want to continue that conversation, you can do so by emailing us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hitting us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod. Or now, new and fresh, you could also connect with us on Instagram at Only Movie Podcast.
Do that connection, Shahir, when you are not jet setting to what could have been your possible futures past in Stockholm in your own mind. Where can folks find you?
You can find me inside the bear at www.shahirdaud.com and on Twitter at Shahir Daud. Matt, when you are not proverbially throwing old relationships away, where can people find you?
You can find me Never being Christian. Jesus. At MATTHEWKROL.com for my life and works, or Skeletor, the number 4, PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, check out the good works we're doing over on Extra Credits. We got a lot of good stuff coming up. Good extra mythology is good. We got something coming up. I believe it'll be out by the time this is The Disappointing Final Level. Why video game endings just don't always stick, and it's from a development perspective. It's very interesting. Also, Shahir, I know we didn't get here, but you had an amazing observation written in your notes. And I just want you, if you could just end this episode with what you wrote down that I laughed heartily at when I read.
Look, I just wanted to say this one thing. Coming from a brown person's perspective, this film does for Swedish people what Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom did for Indians. And I, for one, am 100% okay with that new change in direction. So, Swedish people, if you're out there listening, just know I'm never visiting your country.
You're on notice.
You're on notice. I'm never coming there. And Indians, we're back on the table.
Yay! All right, well, you'll hear us next week.
Bye.
Bye.